afternoon, and welcome to our virtual gathering presented by the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. We are the statewide membership-based historic preservation organization. My name is Beverly Thomas, and on behalf of the Preservation Alliance, I'm pleased to welcome you to Ask the Old House and Barn Experts Roundtable Discussion, the final virtual gathering of our Expo On the Road series. Since we launched in March, we are so glad that people like you and over 1,000 others have joined our 21 well-received virtual sessions on topics from barn repair, architectural styles, energy efficiency, to historic exterior paint colors, stone wall preservation, and solar installations. We've heard from participants that the expertise, guidance, and encouragement offered in these sessions have advanced their projects, and in one case, even saved a historic barn from demolition. The Expo sessions have an ongoing life as their recordings and related blogs can be found on our website at nhpreservation.org. I know many of you have joined us at past Expo sessions, but for those who have not, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping points before we get started. Feel free to turn off your video cameras to help keep the internet connection as strong as possible. Tonight's program will run for about an hour and we'll be using a question and answer format. We are truly fortunate to have such a wealth of expertise gathered in one virtual room, eager to address your questions, so we hope you have many. Because of our high numbers, we ask that you stay muted and use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen for your questions, and I will facilitate the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer all questions, but if we don't get to yours, feel free to forward additional questions to me at bt@nhpreservation.org, and I'll try to get back to you. And before we close, we'll select a lucky winner of today's Expo Door Prize. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to thank our generous Expo on the Road sponsors listed here on the screen, who have enabled us to offer this expansive year-long series of educational programs. Tonight, we are so pleased to have 4 prior Expo presenters back by popular demand. Ian Blackman is a barn preservation contractor who has years of experience working with barn owners to care for and restore their historic structures. Ian established Ian Blackman LLC Preservation and Restoration in 2003 and has been a champion of barn preservation ever since. He's a graduate of the furniture making program at North Bennett Street School in Boston, has worked as a preservation carpenter at Canterbury Shaker Village here in New Hampshire prior to starting his own business. Ian is an active board member of the Preservation Alliance and an exceptional ambassador and supporter of the Preservation Alliance preservation work. Leading by example and encouraging others, he enjoys offering workshops and on-site tours, helping people understand and care for historic barns, and fostering great appreciation for these valued elements of our agricultural heritage. Steve Bedard, Bedard Preservation, has over 45 years experience working on old structures, primarily houses and barns dating from 1665 to 1936. Steve uses a common sense approach in all aspects of his work, from building evaluation and assessments to complete exterior and interior restorations. He works with mechanical contractors to ensure 21st century comfort and convenience while still maintaining the highest level of preservation standards and ethics. Steve is a great supporter of the Preservation Alliance, and we are so pleased to have him with us this evening. Jim DeStefano is president and founder of DeStefano and Chamberlain, Inc., a structural and architectural engineering firm located in Fairfield, Connecticut. Jim is a professional engineer licensed in 22 states, a board certified structural engineer, and a registered architect. He has strong background in design of timber structures and the restoration of historic buildings. Jim is author of Antique New England Homes and Barns, History, Restoration, and Reinterpretation, a wonderful resource book recommended for antique property owners. He lives in an antique home circa 1809 and has lovingly restored and re-restored it over the past 40 years. Scott Hanson of Topsail, Maine, has thought deeply about renovation of historic homes in his 40 years as a designer, carpenter, municipal historic district regulator, historic preservation consultant, and architectural historian. His own 15-year renovation of his historic house, doing much of the work himself, has allowed him to put his ideas to the test and to learn from his mistakes while accumulating a vast library of how-to photos many of which are included in his book, Restoring Your Historic House, the Comprehensive Guide for Homeowners. Scott is a senior associate at the Boston office of McCrosty Historic Advisors. So we have quite a lineup today, and I added up their years of experience, and we have over 150 years of preservation experience. So thank you all panelists for joining us today. So I would love to get started, and I welcome all you participants. Thank you for joining. And please feel free to put your questions in the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. I have a few here that people have sent in. And then I have some that I have actually come up with, and I will start with one of mine, but please do not feel shy about putting questions in the chat feature, or even just a topic that you'd like someone to address. But for the kickoff question, I would like to ask, I'm going to ask Steve this, because I know Steve has a good show and tell. What is your favorite preservation tool that you think all DIYers should have in their preservation toolbox?
One of my favorites is this what we call it's basically a nail puller, and it's made with this rounded edge to be able to give you leverage and pull nails out. Typically, we pull a lot of nails out from the back side of the piece of wood rather than the front side. If we pull it from the front side, we have to include obviously a stick of wood between the tool and what you make sure does not want to get damaged. So this is certainly my favorite tool.
Excellent. And Steve, when you use that tool, are you able to save the nail, or does it destroy the nail?
Typically, it does destroy the nail, but we're after, in most instances, trying to save the wood product, the trim, right, the delicate piece of molding, whatever.
Okay. Does any of our other panelists have a favorite tool they'd like to talk about? Ian.
I would say a laser to level, because I do barns, and it's nice to shoot a line and then measure down and see how the barn is moved over time, and it gives you a good diagnostic of the barn right from the get-go. Other than that, I'd say a hydraulic jack.
So I've never used a laser level, Ian. Is that something easy to figure out how to use?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, we use them basically just to shoot a level line and measure down from a common joint in the barn, and then that tells us, what's moved, and gives us a starting point to go from.
Okay. Jim, do you have anything you want to share?
Well, yeah, there's no one tool, but my advice would be is get a good set of hand tools. Chisels, planes, hammers, hand saws. Don't get carried away with power tools. A good set of old chisels and planes and whatnot are really invaluable.
Okay. And keep them sharp.
Oh, yeah.
And Scott?
I'm going to say my favorite preservation or restoration tool is a good digital camera with an excellent zoom. Just to document existing conditions when I'm starting something, and to document what's behind surfaces when walls or floors are opened up, and to be able to stand on the ground and zoom in closely on high up portions of a building and be able to get good clear photos of what the conditions are. And then to have the archive of images that documents the work that's been done that can be handed on to the next generation, to save them from the hundreds and hundreds of hours I spend trying to figure out what changed over time.
Hey, Scott, you might try a drone. They're very affordable now, and you get real close to something high up and get much better shots with a zoom camera.
Good
Good
point.
call.
And related to that, taking photos, Scott, and documenting, I think it's really important. I was just talking to my husband about this morning, that when you're doing a project, take pictures before you start. Even if there's some section of your house that you're not going to restore, you don't like it, just take those photos so you know what you started with, so you have a baseline. It's really important, even if you don't think that area is significant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, when we started our house, renovation 30 years ago, there weren't digital cameras, and it's so easy now to take pictures, and we're so lucky to have the digital cameras. So take as many pictures as you can. Okay, we have a couple questions here. When people refer to a house or barn with good bones, how would you define that? What should a potential buyer be looking for that is a sign of promising piece of architecture? That's a great question. Who would like to address that first? Let's go in reverse order. We'll go with Scott on that one first.
I think there are actually two answers. There's the more literal answer of, is the house structurally well constructed? You know, is it got a strong frame, a strong foundation? You know, so that's one definition of good bones. And I think the other is it well designed? Is it a good piece of architecture? And I think depending on who's using the phrase, either one can apply. I've heard it used both ways.
Okay. Does anybody else want to chime in on that one?
Sure, I really only hear the term used by realtors to describe and apologize for a house that is really in horrible condition. You know, it may look like a total wreck, but it's got good bones. So, you know, it's one of those things, but when I hear that, it's like, watch out.
Okay. Steve, do you want to comment?
Sure. I think of good bones as being the skeleton frame of the post and beam structure. I really, it's nice to talk about the foundation, nice to talk about the other pieces, but as long as the frame is in reasonable condition, everything else can be built around it and can be fixed around it. So more easily. So that's what I look at.
I agree with Steve. You know, a good frame can stand some of the movement from problems with the foundation and stuff like that if it's a well-built frame. So that's how I define good bones, because a barn that doesn't have a good frame, you know, that gets picked up pretty quickly when the foundation and stuff starts moving, and then you see the damage.
And unfortunately for houses, it's obviously harder to see the frame than in a barn. It's much easier to assess that barn frame.
Yep.
So are there any tricks on how to assess a house frame? Obviously, I guess go up in the attic, right? And in the basement for starters.
Attic, basement, and sills are really where you want to look.
You can see it in the building itself, how if you look at the outside, if you look at the front wall from the side view and you see it bowing out in one direction, and is the other side doing the same bow in the same direction? So is it a tie problem going across, or is it going like this, which means there's no tie in the middle at all, or it's been damaged? So it's harder to do. Ian's job is much easier because it's all right there in front of him. But you pick up the hints. You see the window on one side that's sagging down that tells you that there's something wrong, maybe in the sill. You can typically look in the attic, which is great, which helps a lot. So between those things, you can get a better idea of what's going on with the house frame.
I guess we're going to get right into windows with this next one. How do I repair a sash? I guess a sash that has rot. Let's start with the importance of window preservation. Who wants to take that one on first? Steve, how about you start on that one?
Windows are extremely important in helping define the openings of a house, the actual glazed openings per se. Over time, we've gone from very small panes to larger panes to 2/2s, and then up to 1/1s. And so having those old windows that have an early mutton detail or a detail that's appropriate for your structure is really important to save. Old windows can be preserved we have windows now we're working on that were put in 1736. There's nothing wrong with the windows. They just need a little bit of repair work. New modern windows are only meant to last 15 to 20 years. So you have a choice. You can either have a nice old window that you can repair and reuse and put a good storm window on the outside of it. If you do that, you have the same R value as of a new thermopane window. that's only going to last 15 to 20 years. So when we spec these jobs on some bigger buildings like town halls and meeting houses, that we find that the cost to have the windows professionally restored is considerably less than buying new windows. They're only going to last 15 to 20 years.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I'm gonna ask Jim this question. Jim, if, since you're an architect, and I'm sure you spec new windows often, if someone purchased an old house that already had replacement windows put in, vinyl ones, and they want to go back, what do you often recommend?
As Steve mentioned, if you got the original sash, keep them and fix them by all means. But if you've got windows that have been replaced, I recommend going to a restoration window, something that's been crafted by a mill workshop that is replicating the original light pattern and the original Muntin details. Stay away from the factory windows. Marvin windows are wonderful windows for new houses, but they don't look right in an old house. Something like a Cooper window or something like that is a true restoration window. And you can get those made with true divided lights with double insulated glass. So you have the energy performance of a new window, but they still look exactly historically correct for an old house.
Okay. Scott, do you want to add a comment?
I'll just note that the ideal for dealing with old windows is always to have a professional window rehabilitation done. Those people do amazing work. I mean, they can make a 200-year-old window look and function as like it did the day it was new. And that is absolutely the ideal. It also, because it's labor intensive, is not inexpensive. So if you have your original windows and your budget doesn't allow for full professional rehabilitation, you can actually tighten them up yourself with some off-the-shelf weather stripping products and improve them greatly without going to the, it's not going to last as long, it's not going to be as good. But if you need to, get 5 years to be able to afford the full professional rehab, it can be, a couple hours a window and maybe $5 or $10 in materials, and it can make a huge difference.
Okay. And I just want to put a little plug in for the Preservation Alliance. We, in the past, prior to COVID, have had a window restoration workshop each year where we have a professional come in and actually walk participants through how to do their own windows. And the very first one we did many, many years ago, I think it was within 4 months, a woman who participated in that workshop had done all the windows in her house, and she did an amazing job. So if you're so inclined and you like to do that kind of thing, it is possible that you can do your own as well. Okay, next. Oh, so how about specifically dealing with rot? Ian, I know you do it. Do you do much with window repair yourself?
Well, if it was a house, I would tell people to be really aware of what's happening with their storm windows. If they have those applied, aluminum storm windows, and painters, will paint over the weep holes in those storm windows, and they'll, condense moisture and it'll sit on the windowsill and rot the windowsill. So you really got to take those storms off and then, clean things up. And sometimes, the other guys might not like this solution, but sometimes I like to epoxy the windowsill, treat it like a boat, and then an oil primer paint over that. And then, because you never know what's going to happen down the road. Those aluminum storms go back on there and get painted and get, cause rot again. But, you can, that's with windows, and are we talking rot and sills? Or are we talking?
How about like the bottom rail of the sash to repair that? At what point do you say, okay, this is too far gone? I mean, I think they can always be either repaired with some kind of a product or replicate just that piece, right? If the rest of the sash is in good condition.
You can patch
mean,
in some new wood or go to an epoxy consolidant and filler.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Most of the restoration people work. Don't you agree, Ian?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you've got a sash where the the stiles and the rails and the muttons and mullions are all really falling apart, then you might want to get a new sash built. But other than that, anything is fixable.
Yeah, Abitron makes some very good restoration products that I would recommend using.
Yep.
Okay. All right, next question. Topic is asbestos in a house built in 1905. Says in addition to insulation around steam pipes, where else might asbestos be found? That's a really good question.
Oh.
Who wants to tackle that one?
I don't
I'll go
mind.
then.
Either one of us is fine. Go ahead.
1905 is sort of, the early days of asbestos, pre-World War II, you find a lot more. 1905, you're not finding vinyl asbestos tile, but definitely the steam pipes and the boilers are probably slathered with it. I think those are the main items you find in a house of that vintage.
And just because the house was built in 1905 doesn't mean it didn't get vinyl asbestos tile installed in 1940. Yeah, so it's not only about the construction date, it's about what's happened since.
You could have it in ceiling tile and drop ceiling tile. You can have it in countertops, linoleum
Can be in
floors.
plaster. If it's undisturbed in plaster, it's not a threat. It's only if that's going to end up somehow in the
Oh,
air.
you're not leaving yet.
What's that?
Does this bother you, babes?
Yeah.
I thought you had gone, so I was gonna come in here.
Oh. Somebody's not muted. Okay, and here's just a comment, which I think is a good one. When we were talking about the importance of photography and photographing, it says it's nice to have the photos of the workers who do the restoration as well. And it's kind of fun to look back at old photos and look at the tools they're using and the styles of whatever they're doing. It's really interesting. Old rehab
Don't forget to throw
photos.
in some selfies while you're at it.
What's that?
Don't forget to throw in some selfies. You look back at it.
Oh,
years
right.
later.
Wow, look, I had hair then, or my hair was a different color.
Yeah, the books that we have, we look at and say, what were we thinking?
Oh, yeah.
But now that's all done, I believe it was well worth it. You'd have to ask my wife if she agrees or not. But I
Yeah.
believe it was all worth it.
All right, here's a barn question for you, Ian. I have a barn circa 1750, an oldie. We had the sill replaced and we're surprised to see the floor was not tied into the sill beam. Is it typical the floors were floating / independent, or is this a result of a previous sill replacement?
I think it could be a previous sill replacement, but if it's 1750, it's probably an English barn would be my bet. And English barns had a lot of dirt floor in them, and didn't have a wood floor, and somebody might have added a wood floor later on. In the haymow side or whatever, there wouldn't have been a wood floor. So,
Just the threshing bay would have a wood.
right.
floor.
Yep.
Which is the center.
Yeah. So a lot of times people added, half logs and just they weren't tied into the sill and they added floorboards on top, I mean, that's what it was like at the where I am right now at the Alton Poor Farm, which was an English barn.
Okay. Any suggestions for adding a stair rail to an 1890s home? I'm not sure what this, have you built a removable stair rail to help moving furniture up and down? Not totally clear on that question.
Oh, I know what they're talking about. I know exactly what they're talking about.
Okay,
We have a situation where because of the design of the stairway, you can't easily get furniture up and down. And so in some instances, you can actually do a removable newel and handrail that comes off so you can get up and around where you want to go. So it can be done. It's just, you have to hopefully connect with a craftsman who, or even somebody who's not necessarily in restoration work, but somebody who can figure out how to make that work.
And keep your existing old rail, but just retrofit it?
Yeah, yeah, you can basically keep your old rail and retrofit it. There are always, Ian will tell you, there's always ways around things to make them work.
Okay. And here someone added asbestos insulation lined our old sink. Okay.
Sometimes it's also in glazing putty.
All right, here's a question for Ian. We have a lot of lovely crooked barns here in Maine. How can one determine the difference between structurally stable charm versus serious restoration needs? Barn would not be for a home conversion, but it would continue to be used as working barn. How does one evaluate the timber frame? And when it's covered with old hay and bird poop, that's an easy answer.
Yeah, you get rid of the old hay and bird poop, but wear a
Yep.
mask, you know. I would look at the joinery in the upper structure and see where, if the joinery is failing due to the movement in the barn. And then that'll help you make your decisions on, you know, what the movement in the barn has done that's caused that, you know, sagging and bagging. You know, if it's got a basement on it, then it's a full basement, then it's going to probably be a bank barn, you know, and so it might have movement due to it being a bank barn due to the freeze and thaw cycle. And moisture on the uphill side. So you might want to take care of those kinds of things. But, you know, when we go to restore a barn, level and plumb isn't always the result we're looking for. You know, that's based a lot on budget, but what also determines that is whether the joinery is in sound shape. You know, and if the joinery is in good shape, then, you know, not pulling apart the shoulders, you know, of the mortises or what have you, then, you know, you can decide to leave the barn in the shape it's in. But if you're converting to a house, that might make your decision different. But what I would say is that it's good to get it evaluated, and it's good to get evaluated before you put a roof on it. If you put a new roof on it and it's got a lot of movement that's damaged some of the timber frame, and the roofer wants to either sheave it in plywood or you're going to put a metal roof on it, then that's going to act like a gusset and it's going to lock that barn in the shape it's in without it, you know, you have to remove it. So you really want to get it evaluated and then make your sort of a game plan before you take those kinds of steps.
Okay, thanks, Ian. That was one of my bullet points. I wanted to discuss the importance of a barn evaluation.
Oh, no question. I mean, I'll just say to an example of that is I looked at a barn in Pennacook, New Hampshire, had a beautiful new standing seam roof on it. It was a ground level Yankee barn. And when you went inside, a lot of the first floor had rotted, a lot of the sills had problems. There was a lot of movement. And there was some damage to the joinery. In order to fix that, you know, you want to pick that barn up, you're going to damage that standing seam roof, you know, so, you know, you really want to get those things evaluated and then come up with a full game plan.
Okay, thanks. Here's a great one. Has anyone ever seen a historic house with a double sill? My 1774 house has two sills and nobody knows why. The outer sill supports the exterior walls and the inner sill supports the floor joists. Why would the house have been built this way? Or could the house have been relocated at some point and the outer sill added at that time? Steve, do you want to address that one?
I believe I know of 6 of them in the state of New Hampshire. I don't know if this person is number 7 or where they're calling from. We see it. It's all over the state, so it's not a regional thing. Although in Gilmanton, New Hampshire alone, there are at least 2 of them, if not 3. Actually, no, there were 3 in Gilmanton that I know of.
The house is in rural Hanover. New
House
Hampshire.
there again. We're working on one now in Epping that's double silled. A lot of times it's just double silled in the area where the basement is and not where the crawl space is, but the one at Epping right now is double silled all the way around. It makes for an interesting repair job with sills, but we just accomplished it. Concerning about why it's there, I haven't, the experts that I've heard cannot explain it, why they chose to have the double sill. The exterior of the building is supported from that exterior sill, and the flooring is basically supported from that interior sill. and there's a space of 6 or 8 inches in between the two. And so they're only connected the inside sills are only connected to the outside sills in 4 locations.
Let's go to our structural engineer, Jim.
Well, yeah, first I'd like to say, I've never seen it before, but let me, comment that trying to over intellectualize on what they were thinking is sometimes a futile gesture. And often it's just an individual house writer or timber framer had a bad idea and he executed every house he built that way, and every apprentice that worked under him learned that that's the way to do it, so that you'll get this regional trend. And it sounds like it is a New Hampshire thing, where you're just seeing the product of a particular tradesman and his descendants.
Scott, have you seen any in Maine or Mass?
When the question popped up on the screen, it triggered something. I am aware of one in Maine, but I can't recall any details on it. But I probably near the New Hampshire border.
I've never seen a barn framed that way. Ian, have you ever seen one double sill? No, I didn't.
No.
So it's got to be strictly a house situation.
And it sounds like it's a New Hampshire thing too.
And the interesting thing is when the outer sill does rot away, the floor dives down like this
Yeah.
towards the wall very
Yeah.
badly,
Yeah.
badly.
Yep.
So,
Okay, well, that's a good topic for someone to do some further research on. If someone wants to write it, Scott, if you want to write another book, maybe, or Jim?
Not on that topic.
Not that
Not yet.
book.
Okay. All right. I think we've gone through the questions in the chat. So I have a bunch of other here that I am going to ask. All right. This is sort of a fun one. What is your best lesson learned the hard way when you were working on your own rehabilitation project of your house or even in your professional field? Let's start with Steve.
I'm gonna pass to Ian. I got to think
Oh.
about that one for a minute.
Okay.
Ah! I would say the lesson that I've learned is to take your time to really get to know the structure that you're going to work on before you kind of jump in. When I do a barn evaluation, and even when I started working on something, it takes a while, before you really can figure out what's going on, and sometimes it changes your plan going in, so you got to be flexible. But I'd say you got to take your time to really get to know the structure and what's happened to it and what's going on before you kind of jump into the pond.
And even if you're living in a house, if we're talking about a house, it's really good
Same
to
thing, I think.
live in there for a while.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing,
Yeah. Okay. Scott, do you have a favorite lesson learned?
Yeah, safety matters. Working on buildings is dangerous, and hard hats, eye protection, ear protection, steel-toed shoes, all of the things that in my upbringing in northern New Hampshire were kind of poo-pooed, they are important. And, you can get very seriously hurt working on your own house if you're not paying attention to safety for yourself and the people around you.
That's a good one. Jim.
Well, I can say on slightly different direction, the biggest mistake I made, and I learned the lesson from restoring my own house, is don't go anywhere near your house with a sandblaster. And when I was young and foolish, I had this crazy idea that sandblasting would be a great way to remove the paint from the outside of my house. And it removed the paint, great, but along the way, it did a lot of damage to the woodwork and the glass and everything else. So it's very tempting to think of a quick fix and something that's easier than the harder option, but usually in the long run, it's a bad idea.
All right, I'm ready to go. Here we go.
Okay, Steve.
I think it's really important to go with your gut feeling on a lot of things, especially when you're relying upon the expertise of others. You need to really question what's going on. We had when we first moved here, to this house in 1978, we had a heating company come in and designed a heating system where the hot air was on the inside of the building and the cold air was on the outside, around the outside of the building. Exactly. I know. It didn't make any sense to me at the time. I didn't fight hard enough. They installed it. It didn't work. They had to come back and fix it. And so, trust your common sense. If a heating company comes in and says, oh yeah, we can put the heat in we can put the air handler in your attic and blow the heat down that way, that doesn't work as well, because you want heat to be at your feet to keep you warm, not at your head. And so just go with it. You need to have common sense and go with your common sense as to whether the information you're getting is correct. And if you do talk to someone, an expert, and you don't like you don't try, you think about what they're saying and your gut feeling is not right, contact another one. Get another opinion first.
Okay, good point. Here's another one about chimneys and masonry and stone. Do the central chimneys from 1720 that are stone in the basement go up to the roof through 3 stories? I think they're asking, are they all stone? When only brick is seen in the 5x7 large fireplace and the 4 other room fireplaces. Wondering about restoration. 1720 house, central chimney. I think they're asking, does that stone go all the way up? Not typically.
Not typically.
Usually, I think
Not
it's
typically.
rare. Usually the basement has the stone, and then from the floor up, what we see is it's all brick from there up.
What
Okay.
town? Do we know what town they're in?
No.
And I think, like Rhode Island has the stone enders that have stone chimneys that go all the way up, that extend the full width of the wall. There are exceptions, but I think that's not the most common, and certainly not in Maine and New Hampshire.
Yeah, this says, now he's answering, or she, Oxford, Massachusetts.
Well, 1720s, I suppose it could be to a certain extent, that early it could be. Hard to say.
So when you're restoring that, is there anything to consider when you're talking about the interface between the stone and the brick? I think the fireplaces are lined with brick. I think that's what they're saying here.
Usually you'd have one common flow that all the fireplace feed into, which creates a whole bunch of issues, and usually they're always unlined, and the mortar is always deteriorated. So going in with a flue lining system, if you're thinking about reusing or using the chimneys for burning fires, is a very prudent thing to do.
All right,
And
that's, go ahead, Scott.
I would say find a restoration mason with good experience with early chimneys.
Yep.
Your average mason who's doing brick veneer on new construction is not going to have a clue how to handle that chimney.
Right. And I think you have to be careful with lining to a certain extent to be aware that you can affect the draft of a fireplace if you're pouring in like a ferrous cement liner or something like that, and you really want to be careful of that, because you might end up not being able to have a fire in there afterwards because the draft will be so compromised. So you have to be, that's why it's good to get a good restoration mason in there to have a look at it.
The other thing you can do too is you can actually, if it does enter into one big flue, you can actually, a mason can go down there and reparge the inside, do the repairs and reparge the inside of that flue, as well as you can open up areas over a fireplace to redo the smoke chambers, do the same thing, repair the smoke chambers, and then parge them, and then put the bricks back, and then put the surface back there also.
But definitely with a mason with experience in that type of work.
And a skinny, small mason, the better.
Okay, since we're on masonry and chimney topic, anything else related to chimneys that you want to add? we are talking, it's approaching heating season now, cleaning chimneys, putting tops on your covers if they're not in use. Does anybody want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, the old chimneys very often did not have a rain cap on them, and the rain and the leaves and the critters just sort of fell down inside the flues. It's not historically correct to put a rain cap on, but it certainly improves the performance and longevity of your chimney. So putting a stone cap's not a bad idea.
But make sure it's flat black or copper that will weather in a natural way and not some shiny stainless steel thing that's going to distract from the character of the house.
I would just say it goes back to what Steve said, though, is go with your gut feeling and get somebody who's really good at what they're doing and question it. Like if you just have, kind of a commercial, big company that comes in and just blows liners in and stuff like that, I think you really want to take your time and really think about it.
Okay. All right, another question here. This is another barn one. Ian's getting a lot of barn questions today. Sizing cables and turnbuckles for pulling small barn back together that doesn't yet have adequate collar ties. What sort of loads might be encountered?
Oh, let me give that one to Jim.
You can both answer.
Well, I would say I don't like turnbuckles and period. So, cables. So, I mean, I prefer to fix the problem some other way,
Well, I think what he's saying, or Tim Allen, it says doesn't have collar ties yet. So I think he wants to pull it back with these the turnbuckles and then put ties in.
Yeah, so that makes me think it might be a later barn, maybe not a timber frame, maybe sort of more something like 1890s or something. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, unless somebody cut out collar ties and it's got a problem, or it's a small barn with half pole rafters that are undersized and weak and starting to have a problem. Shoot, I mean, in that case, I still would want to put in some collar ties or do something. I don't know. Jim, go ahead.
What would you do? What would you do?
Let me dive in here, because I wouldn't recommend collar ties, but tie beams are appropriate.
Yeah.
It sounds like
Well, the question, Jim, might be if it's a small barn, it's half log rafters and they're undersized, right?
what we see more often is barns have been retrofitted with hay tracks. And
Yeah,
when they put the hay track in, they cut the tie beams out.
yeah. Well,
That
that's true.
causes all these problems. And usually the best thing to do is put tie beams back in. The other thing we see is tie beams with fractured tension joints at the post.
Yeah.
And very often you need to just repair those joints. And using rods and turnbuckles is not a bad way to kind of pull it in so you can do the repairs and even leave them in place if you have to. As far as sizing, it's rare that you would need something bigger than a 3/4 inch rod and turnbuckle for a barn tie beam on the bent lines. I don't recommend using cable because cable stretches a lot more than a solid rod. So usually using a solid threaded rod is a better choice than a cable in those situations.
Right. So let me clarify something. If he's saying tie beams, if it's a tie beams, then it might be a bigger barn where they'll cut out those. But I consider that the lower frame, part of the frame. So it would be nice to know if he's talking about rafters.
Well,
or
he
if he's
says
talking about-
a small barn. He wants to pull a small barn back together that doesn't yet have adequate collar ties. What sorts of loads might be encountered?
Yeah. So once again, I'll say if it's a small barn, it very well might have half log rafters. And that's a harder problem to deal with.
Yeah, and then he
Steve,
says,
any suggestions there?
and then he says cable's not meant to be permanent.
So Ian, how are you Ian, how would you explain to them how you would pull it back together? I think.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, so I would look at the joinery. If it's had tie beams that have been taken out, then I would look at the lower joinery and see if it's starting to have problems due to that. If it's not, then I'll just put the tie beams back in again. if it's coming apart, then I'll pull it back together again and as I'm
So
putting.
how are you gonna pull it back? What's the method you're
Well,
gonna
if
use?
I was doing it, I would be just putting some straps on either end and putting a big come along on there and bringing it back.
Okay, that's good.
Come along, not a turnbuckle.
No, because I'd be doing the
I agree.
repair right then. I'd bring it back and just do it, But if it's once again, if it's a small like village barn with which you see very commonly with half log rafters that are way undersized and they're having problems. So if we're talking about a roof sag or walls, there's two different things. If his roof is sagging, that's where then we're talking collar ties. If it's lower down, then we're talking the tie beams. You understand what I'm saying, Beverly?
I think it's lower down. That's
Okay,
what
so
I'm,
then I would just put if the joinery is okay, I would just put the tie beams back in again.
Yeah.
Or put tie beams in.
Well, you know what? I'm thinking of, maybe it was like a carrot shed situation where you have a sidewall that's 10 feet, but the tie beams are at 7 feet or 8 feet, and you got that bowing out. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
all right, on to a new topic here. Currently have a dirt floor in the cellar. It was recommended that to dry out the humidity that we dig down 10 inches and lay down crushed stone, pour concrete over the stone. There's concern on my part whether fieldstone walls much below, to undermine the fieldstone walls. I could lay down plastic sheeting, pea stone on top of concrete, but a concrete floor sounds nice. Where fieldstone foundations laid in trench or just on the ground. All right, who wants to address that? Ian,
And I think the question is a good one, that it'd be great to dig down, get more headroom, put crushed stone, a vapor barrier, and a slab, but most of the time you'd be digging down below the bottom of your foundation walls to do that and undermining the foundation. So I never recommend digging down below the bottom of the foundation walls, which is often only a few inches below the earthen floor. So at a bare minimum, you want to go in with a vapor barrier and a concrete slab. The crushed stone's nice, but if you don't have the depth to accommodate it, that's the first thing I would give up. But don't undermine the foundation walls unless you want to get into a very extravagant underpinning operation.
Steve, do you want to address that one?
Yeah, we're doing two of them right now. And so there again, I think that that's very important that people understand is not to undermine the wall itself. You have to kind of do like a test pit next to the wall in various areas in the basement and see how further down that foundation goes. If it continues to go down, you could do something deeper, but if not, you're really limited as what you're going to be doing for digging in the basement. You want to get out any of that wooden debris and any rotted wood, bad soil types. Hopefully you've already addressed outside. Ready, Ian? You addressed the drainage problem around the building, so you're not getting water into the building that's compounding your issues that's in the basement. The other piece, we don't use basements anymore like they were meant to be used. You shouldn't be storing boxes down there. You shouldn't be putting books down there. You shouldn't be putting wood down there. So it's all right to lose a little, my estimation, to lose a little headroom because you're not spending that much time down there anymore. Anytime that we do any new electrical work, we move the box upstairs. So the electrical is all upstairs. If you have if you blow a fuse or if you blow a breaker, you can go easily get at it without going down the stairs to it. So you're really limited as what's down there. Your furnace is probably down there, and that's in your water tank or your water heater, but that's about it. So it's okay to lose a little bit of headroom.
I'll add that the most important part is simply getting a good vapor barrier in there to stop the moisture.
Yep.
Whether you address a finished floor of any type, the vapor barrier is critical.
It should be at least 10 mils.
Crawl space or a basement brings an incredible amount of humidity and dampness into a house. And if you're finding in the wintertime condensation on the inside of the windows, that moisture is probably coming in through the crawl space, either crawl space vents or an earthen floor. Getting that earthen floor sealed up is really very important.
Yeah.
Okay. let's stay in the basement and talk about, assuming that your floor is sealed up now, let's talk about insulating or air sealing stone foundations. Scott, do you want to start on that one?
Sure. There are, I think, a variety of approaches. I'm not a big fan of just spraying foam over a stone or brick foundation. I have seen cases where a fabric material is suspended from the sills and then the foam is applied to the material so it can be removed without, there's no foam adhered to the structure. And so I think if you can come up with a solution like that, which also would allow any water that penetrates the wall to flow behind the insulation, that can work. Air sealing is very, very important to comfort in any house, old or new. But I think, how it's insulated is probably, how to insulate it well is probably not going to be what average Joe contractor is going to recommend.
Okay. Steve, do you want to talk about that one?
We don't recommend that you insulate your basement floor, the ceiling of your basement and your basically your first floor. We do not recommend doing that because of the issue of moisture and the issue of critters and how you keep them out of that. We don't recommend spray foam. We found that, and I can tell you from my own foundation, we tightened up. We had a mason go around and repoint around my foundation on the outside, and then go in the basement and see if you saw any daylight, repoint there. We changed the temperature of the basement by 15 degrees alone just by doing that.
Mhm.
So we, and everything is, there's nothing, no nesting material down there for anybody, for any animals or anything like that. So that's what we do in the basement area is try to get everything repointed and sealed up and keep doing. We don't at this point even put back basement windows because of the maintenance issue to deal with those. We basically fill those back in and go to a dehumidifier, really good quality dehumidifier to take care of any moisture that accumulates in the basement. And if you're going to use if you are going to put a vapor barrier down, it should be at least 10 mil for the vapor barrier.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that, or should we move on? We'll move on. Okay, here's a good question. Does anyone have a good print web resource for historical architectural details that would be organized by age, style, interior, exterior doors, windows, interior paneling, wainscot, cabinetry, hardware, paint colors, etc.? Scott, do you want to talk about your book?
Sure. All of those are addressed in my book, 700 pages of it. In terms of web resources, there is great information on the web and there is terrible information on the web. And the challenge is finding the good stuff and not getting lost in the crap, because there's really more crap than good stuff. And so, I don't know a single resource that addresses that as completely as the questioner is looking for. For exterior character defining features, I think Virginia Savage's A Field Guide to American Houses is a great resource. I'm not aware that anyone has done an interior equivalent to that book.
James Garvin's Building History of Northern New England is a
Northern New
fabulous.
England, yeah. I was thinking more globally, but you're right.
Yeah.
Jim's book on Northern New England is very much that.
Anybody who's working on a historic house, beyond owning Scott's book, should definitely own Jim Garvin's book, because it really lays out all the basics interior and exterior and goes through the timeline, how those apply. And it's just, I try to give, if they'll take one, I try to give all my crew members, my new guys, a copy of that so that they'll understand what they're seeing in front of them.
Okay, did we interrupt you, Scott? I'm sorry.
No, that was
No.
good. I am talking to my publisher about doing a volume that addresses interiors and exteriors that is equivalent to a field guide to American houses. So we'll see how long it takes me to get that done.
Okay, and then for barn books, I don't know, Ian, do you have some favorites? I certainly do.
You go ahead, Beverly. They're
All
gonna be
right.
okay.
Tom Visser's Field Guide to New England, I guess it's New England Agricultural Structures is a great book for identifying features. And also Tom Hubka's, and I think actually Tom's even on our call today. Big House, Little House, Back House Barn is a fabulous book.
Yes.
Those are two of my favorite barn books. And John Porter's Preserving Old
Porter.
Barns obviously is a fabulous book too. And he just updated that with some new information. So it's a great resource to have and some sort of practical repair solutions too that even homeowners can do on their old barns as well. Ian, do you have any to add?
Nope, those are them.
No, okay. Jim, do you? Jim's book.
Well, my book, yeah. Nobody brought that up.
And just so everybody knows, I'll be sending an email out in tomorrow or the next day, and I will have information about how you can purchase these books, okay? So don't worry that you have to frantically be writing things down now. Okay, we're getting close here. There's one more question. My 18th century house has documented history from 70 years ago of powder post beetle infestation in the beams, and there's still evidence of the beetles' presence today. Any ideas on how to assess whether the beams are structurally sound from end to end without cutting through them? Whoa. Ian.
Well, I'll go back to the dirt floor in the basement. I mean, you really want to take care of that for rising moisture. And as far as, it takes a really good infestation to really demolish, at least in a barn, demolish the timber frames. But where you can, and usually it's in the basement, but Boracare is a great product for taking care of powder post beetles.
But for assessing the extent of the damage, nothing beats an awl.
No, that's right. A nice,
Probing the timber
an all, an ice pick, something like that.
Yeah, see how far the soft wood is.
Yep.
Sometimes it goes all the way through and there's nothing left in the core. And sometimes it's only half an inch or an inch deep.
Yeah.
And everything in between. But as Ian mentioned, moisture is what it's all about because the powder post beetles need a high moisture content, which is why you generally only see them in the basements and you don't see them up above. And as long as that moisture is present, they're going to be in there chewing away.
Sure.
And Boracare is an outstanding treatment. And so if you want to kill them, the Boracare is the way to go.
But the best thing to do is to take care of that dirt floor and get a dehumidifier down there and do the Boracare. I mean, you save a ton of money down the road by running a dehumidifier and taking care of that rising moisture from that dirt floor. Your floor joists start having problems and it gets more expensive in a hurry.
And it's one good thing about the Boracare and powder post beetles. You can do this yourself. You don't have to hire someone to do it. You can get a little backpack sprayer and go for it and mix it appropriately. And there's no need to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to do that.
That's right. That's right. And Boracare is not like this really heavy duty toxic kind of thing that's suit up with a, spacesuit. It's really easy to do.
But is it true that you can't get it in a retail store? You have to order it online? I haven't been able to find it.
You have to order it online.
Yeah.
But it's non-toxic to mammals, although it's toxic to bugs and fungus.
Yeah.
Which is the best of all worlds.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm looking at the time. I have to trying to stick to close to an hour. We're already at an hour. I just want to address This one other question. Is it true that beetles die off in heat, so they're only in unheated areas? I think they're talking about powder boats, but
Yeah,
No,
I
that's
don't
not
think that's
true.
true.
not true.
No.
Well, if you burn the house down, you.
That'll take care of it.
All right, and then there's a comment here, Scott. There's a scary photo in Scott's book of how beams can fool you into thinking they're okay. Because often you don't see that deterioration. It's in the core of the beam, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's, I think an 8x8, a section of an 8x8 post from a church in, I think, Daring, New Hampshire, that on the outside is completely intact and the entire core has been eaten away. So it's really only about an inch of wood all the way around.
Right.
That's very characteristic of termite damage, because termites don't like the light of day. So they'll leave a paper thin shell of wood on the outside and consume the whole, inside of a timber.
Yeah. Well, in an old barn, mice tend to they make their nests in knee brace mortises and stuff like that, and they'll rot that out over time.
Okay, this is actually a good segue, is we will be hosting a barn talk at the Farm and Forest Expo in February. And part of the talk will be talking about bug infestation in barns. So stay tuned for that.
Beverly,
All right.
can I interrupt?
Yes,
With your list of books that are available, perhaps you would also put some contact information for our speakers, as they may be hired as consultants to give a look-see on an entire house and barn to point out where somebody might get started and what to watch for, what's the most dangerous, what's pretty much okay. I'd appreciate that.
I will do that. That sounds like my buddy Romeo. Is that true?
That's me.
Hi. Yes, I will put contact information in the post-event email, I promise. And a lot of other good information that we've shared here. So I'm going to do my closing comments. Don't anybody go away yet, because we have to pick the door prize winner as well. So I just want to thank our wonderful panelists for this great informative discussion, sharing your enthusiasm for old buildings, your expertise. This probably could have gone on for another couple hours, but we really must stop here. And thank you all who have participated in joining today, for your engaging questions and for all the preservation work you're doing on your historic properties. We want you to know the Alliance is here to help and encourage you to check out our website at nhpreservation.org, or to send us an email to bt@nhpreservation.org at any time with questions or concerns. And be sure to check out our Expo guide of 50 products and service providers on the Expo page of the website. We also have a directory of preservation contractors and consultants if you're in need of such. Although this program is our last of our 2021 Expo series, we do have one final virtual program of the year coming up on Thursday at 5 o'clock for those interested in how to successfully get a community preservation project off the ground. You can register for Getting Started with Community Preservation Projects, Laying the Foundation for Success on our website at nhpreservation.org. And next year brings more. We'll be offering virtual and in-person programs throughout the year, barring no bad pandemic turns, on topics such as resilient buildings, window restoration, and more on community preservation planning. And we do hope to have a window restoration workshop as well, a hands-on workshop. So stay tuned to our website for those upcoming programs, and we hope to have a majority of them listed in January. And for those who have been to our in-person expo in the past, we love to give away door prizes at our events as a token of our appreciation for your participation. So I would like to announce that today's door prize winner will receive a one-year membership in the Preservation Alliance. And the door prize winner for today is Cynthia Bronson. Cynthia, if you're still with us, you can unmute yourself and say hello if you'd like. Oh, I think she logged off. Uh-oh. She was
I
on
can
here
hear her.
before. Is she here? She's not here. Okay, I'm gonna go to my second pick then. Bonnie Burak. Are you here, Bonnie? Oh.
Yes, I
Bonnie's-
am. Yes, I am.
Excellent. Well, you're the lucky winner of today's door prize.
Well, thank you. That's wonderful.
Do you
That's
have a
wonderful.
historic house you're living in?
No, but we do have a post and beam. We're living in a post and beam house.
Oh, great.
It's not old. It's not necessarily old. It's, it's been around a little while, but
Yeah,
not like
yeah.
anything you guys are talking about, so. But I recognize the ceiling in Ian's house.
In
'cause it looks
Ian's,
like ours.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining today and congratulations
you.
on winning the membership.
Thank you. That's
Beverly,
great.
do we get a last word?
You do. Hold on. Let me just say a few more thank yous. Okay. And as I had mentioned, I'll be sending a follow-up email to everybody, all our participants with the panelists' contact information and more information on books and other resources. And thanks again to our generous panelists who have volunteered many hours to help us with our Expo programming throughout the year. Many of them have done multiple programs, so I really want to express my thanks to all of you. And to our Expo sponsors, and to all of you who have participated in these Expo sessions throughout the year. And those of you who are doing incredible work on your historic properties, and you're also supporters of our critical work that help advance efforts to save and steward special places around New Hampshire. Please keep the Preservation Alliance vibrant by making a donation or considering a gift of membership, and check out the store on our website, which has great holiday gift ideas too. And before I say thank you and good night, I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
I just wanted to say, take your time. When you're doing a restoration, right, you take your time, get all the advice, come up with a good game plan, and it'll save you money down the road. And then all I want to say is, thanks for joining us. But when you drive around, look at all those barns and look at all those nice old buildings and think what the world would be like without them. What does the New England landscape look like without them? And so donate to the Preservation Alliance. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Ian. Jim or Scott or Steve, do any of you guys want to have a closing comment?
Yeah, I'll go. I want to thank the people who have tuned into this, and the people across the state who have decided to restore an old house or
Yep.
work on an old house. It's sometimes can be a lot easier to do something differently. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be saving these buildings. When we get to towns and municipalities and rural areas, it's up to you. If you see a structure in need or has to be helped, start the process to try to save that building before it's too late, before we lose it, because once they're gone, they're gone. And there's so many examples of this where one person in the community started a process by how to save a building and saving that building, and then it did get saved. And it may take 2 or 3 years, but it did get saved. So really hats off to the people who do that type of thing.
Thanks, Steve. Scott, do you have a comment?
Like everyone else, thank you to everyone who has attended, and thank you to the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance for bringing information to the people who need it. When I got started in this field in the 1970s, information was much harder to come by. The internet is also a great tool for preservation. As I said before, it can take you to a lot of bad information, but if you can weed through it, there's a great deal of information readily available that used to be very hard to find. So thanks for doing your part to get it out there.
Okay. Thank you all. Jim, so no comment. You're good.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay, that's what I was just going to say. We
Sorry.
wish everyone well and have a wonderful holiday season and enjoy your historic properties. Take care, everybody.